Greetings ADM1370 students. Here's the promised video tutorial on logical and conditional functions. So in class we had briefly talked about both logical and conditional functions, and I showed you several examples of how to use these functions. I'm just going to review these very quickly with you once again. So I'm going to go into my Excel spreadsheet, which I have for the examples. So this is what we've done in the lab, so I'm going to go through the exact same exercise once again with you, and hopefully you'll be able to follow me a little bit better through the video. And again, the advantage here is that if you get stuck somewhere, or if you need a little bit more time on one of the functions or features, you can pause the video, try it yourself, and do it that way. All right, so we have three worksheets within this workbook. So I'm working with lecture 12 examples data. That's the file that you need to have open. Now, for purposes of this video tutorial, I'm not going to go into the theoretical aspects of logical and conditional functions. All of that is in the slides. We've talked about that in the class. The purpose of this video is to just quickly take you through the steps that we've done in the lab. So the first part of the example is about logical tests. And as I'd explained in class, logical tests are simply formulas that you use in Excel. They're not functions, they're just simple formulas that you use in Excel with some comparison operators, and the result of these formulas is either a true or a false value. So they basically return true or false based on whether the test is satisfied or not. So in our example, we basically have a property management company or a real estate company. We have the names of the agents in column A. They're selling different properties, so the list price of the property is shown in column B. Column C is the actual sale price at which the property was sold, and column D shows you the days on market. So this is how many days the property was on market before it was sold. So we're being asked to answer several questions, and that's what we're going to do first. So columns G to J are asking different questions which we want to answer using logical tests and logical functions. So first we're going to get started with logical tests. So column G, the question is the list price of this property more than $250,000? So we just need to do a quick logical test to compare the list price, which is in column B, with a predefined value of $250,000. So all we got to do is type in our logical test in a formula. So again, formulas start with the equal to symbol, and in this case we are comparing the value in cell B2 with 250,000. So our comparison operator in this case is greater than, so I'm using the angle bracket. So B2 greater than 250,000, right? So that's my logical test. So again, that's a simple formula. I'm just checking cell B2 whether it's greater than 250,000. I press enter, and I basically get value of true in the first case. Now I can use autofill for the rest of the cells and drag it down, and you can see that in some instances it comes out to be false. In other instances it is true. So you can quickly eyeball and see that wherever the list price was below 250,000 or 250,000, it would be shown as false, and wherever it was more than 250,000, it would show as true. All right, so let's move on to the next one. Once again, the logical test that we need to do in this case is whether the property has been on the market for 75 days or more. So in this particular case, we are interested in doing a logical test. So it's going to be days on the market value, which is in cell D2, and we want to see whether that's greater than or equal to 75. All right, so we're using the greater than or equal to symbol in this case, which is the angle bracket followed by the equal to sign. Once again, a simple logical test. It's not a function. You're not using any function in this case. And once again, the value that's going to be returned to you is either true or false. So in the first case, it was 60 days, so it has not been greater than or equal to 75, so that's why it returns false. And once you drag this down using autofill, you'll see that it returns true in a couple of cases. For row 3, it's true. For row 6, it's true. And again, row 6, you can see it's exactly 75. So it is greater than or equal to 75, so it does return true. And similarly, the last couple of rows are all true. All right, let's move on to the next one. So property agent David Ortiz, true or false? Once again, we just need a true or false value, and this is a simple logical test. The only difference here is that we are going to be comparing a string value. So string values always need to be enclosed within quotes. So you need to use quotation marks around the string value. So in this case, we're going to say equal to. Let's check the agent, all right, which is in cell A2, and we're checking whether the agent is equal to David Ortiz. So again, David Ortiz needs to be in quotation marks, and once again, be careful with your spelling and your case. It has to be case sensitive, and the spelling has to be correct. All right, so is the value in cell A2 equal to David Ortiz? True or false? Okay, it's false because again, in the agent in first row is not David Ortiz, so it's false. Let's drag this down using autofill. It comes out to be true in 3 instances. So for row 3, it's true. For row 7, it's true. And in this case, for row 12, it's also true. All right, so you've just done a logical test doing a comparison with a string or a text-based value. All right. And then now let's move on to column J, which is a little bit more tricky. In this particular case, you have 2 criteria. So the criteria is that the property's been listed by David Ortiz and it's been on the market for 70 days, or more than 70 days, sorry. So there are 2 criteria that need to be met in this particular case. And this is where we're going to use a logical function, right? So now we are going to use a logical function, not a simple logical test. And the logical function we're going to use in this case is the AND function, which allows us to use 2 logical tests and give us the results in case both of those logical tests are true. So we're going to type in equals AND, open brackets. What's our first logical test? Our first logical test is to check the agent, whether that's equal to David Ortiz, simply the way we did it in the last case. Careful with your spellings again. And comma, what's our second logical test? The second logical test is days on market greater than 70. Right? So that's our second logical test. So once again, if you look at the formula, our formula is using the AND function. In the AND function, we need 2 parameters, and each of those parameters has to be a logical test. And now you know what a logical test is. A logical test is anything that uses a comparison operator to compare values between different cells or different values. All right, so we have the first logical test is A2 equals David Ortiz, and our second logical test is D2 greater than 70. Right, we press enter, and in the first case it's false. And as you can see, the agent is not David Ortiz. The days on market is not more than 70, so it is false. So both of those criteria are not being met, and it comes out to be false. We use autofill for the rest of the cells. It comes out to be false in most cases. Let's check the cases where it does come out to be true. So for row number 2, it is true because the agent is David Ortiz and it's been on the market for more than 70 days, right? So both of those criteria are being met, so it comes out to be true. For row number 12, once again, it's David Ortiz and it's been on the market for 80 days, which is greater than 70. So that is also true. Let's check one more case just for completion. Row number 7 has the agent listed as David Ortiz, which is fine. The first criteria is being met. But the second criteria is D7 greater than 70, which is not greater than 70. So 45 is the days on market. So that's not greater than 70. So the second criteria is not being met. And that is why that's coming out to be false, because both the criteria need to be met when you use the AND function. So the AND function requires both criteria to be met. The other function which you can use is the OR function, which will allow you to test for at least one of the two criteria to be met. But that wouldn't have helped us in this particular case. So we had to use the AND function because we were interested in both the criteria being met for this specific question. All right, so that's basically using logical tests and logical functions. So that was the first part of our lab. Now, the second part of the lab was where we actually talked about the if function. So I'm going to go on to the second worksheet. And the if function is an example of a conditional function. Now, the difference, once again, between a logical function and a conditional function is that a logical function only returns a value of true or false. You have no control over it. It basically just returns a value of true or false. Whereas the if function, or any conditional function that you use, conditional functions can return other values than true or false. It can return any sort of calculation. It can return any other sort of text-based or numerical value, whatever it is that you want it to return after it basically tests for certain criteria. Once again, we are interested in checking for certain criteria or conditions. And if those conditions are being met, we want to return a value. If the conditions are not being met, then we want to do something else. That's what we do with conditional functions. So here's our example. We have a company with some employees. We know the salary of those employees. And we also know whether these employees have subscribed for a life insurance plan, so whether they've opted for a life insurance plan or not. Based on their salaries or their role in the organization, perhaps, we know the insurance premium that needs to be paid. So we have that information listed in column D as well. In column E, we now need to calculate the insurance premium per year. So basically what we need to do is check column B to see if they have life insurance. If that says yes, we will then multiply the salary with the premium rate. Otherwise, we will just return 0 as the insurance premium. So if they do have life insurance, their insurance premium will be the premium rate times the salary. Otherwise, we return a value of 0. So let's write the if function for this. So we're going to say equals if, right, open brackets, what's our logical test? So the first thing that we need to do is to test for something. So once again, your logical test in this case is to check cell B2 whether the value in cell B2 is equal to yes. Right, once again, careful with your spelling and case. Right, so that's your logical test. Is the value in cell B2 equal to yes? All right, the next part is, what do you want to do if the value is true? If basically that test comes out to be true, what do you want to do in that case? All right, so in that case, like I said before, we're just going to multiply the salary, which is in cell C2, with the premium rate, which is in cell D2. So that's what our output is going to be in case the criteria in my first parameter is satisfied. So in case B2 is equal to yes, I want to multiply C2 with D2, comma. What's the third parameter? The third parameter specifies what you want to do in case the first parameter is not satisfied. So in case our logical test is not satisfied, then what? Right? So in that case, like I said, we simply return a value of 0. So close brackets after that. So once again, let's take a look at the if function. The if function requires you to provide 3 parameters. The first parameter is the logical test. In this case, it's B2 equals yes. The second parameter is the output or the calculation or whatever it is that you want to do in case the criteria in the first parameter are being met. And then the third parameter in this case is, what do you want to do or what do you want to output if the criteria is not being met, right? So that's how you read the if function. It has 3 parts and you should be aware of what each part stands for. The logical test, the output if the logical test is true, the output if the logical test is false, right? So with that, we're going to press enter. So you get an insurance premium of $2,000 for John Smith because he has life insurance, and we know the premium and the salary, so they get multiplied together for a value of $2,000. Similarly, if I use autofill for the other cells, it's 0 for the next two people because they do not have life insurance. It's 1080 for Jenny, and then for Brad, it's 0 again. Let's go ahead and format these cells as currency values. So I'm going to highlight them. Once again, go to my Home tab, and under the number category, I'm just going to choose currency. And I'm okay with 2 decimal places here, so you can leave that be, or if you want, you can actually increase or decrease the number of decimal places by clicking on these buttons underneath the drop-down menu. All right, so let's say I don't want any decimals, so I'm going to just decrease the decimal places. All right, so that is your insurance premium per year. Okay, so now that we know how to use an if function, we can actually proceed to our next example, which is to use multiple if functions together, or what we've referred to in the lab as nested if functions. So nested if functions basically allow you to embed one if function within another one. So it allows you to string together multiple if functions because there might be multiple criteria that you want to check one step at a time. So that's what we're going to do in our next example in the third worksheet. Our example is similar. We have employees, we know their salary, we know their pay grade, and as you can see in this table on the right side, for each pay grade, I actually also have some bonus premiums. So pay grade 1 corresponds to a bonus premium of 2%, pay grade 2, bonus premium is 3%, pay grade 3 bonus premium is 4%. So what we want to do now is we want to use this information in order to calculate the bonus premium for every person. And once we have the bonus premium, then we want to calculate the actual bonus, okay, which is simply going to be the product of the bonus premium and the salary. So how do we do this? So in the bonus premium column, we have to use a nested if function. We're going to check one step at a time to see whether the pay grade is equal to 1 or 2 or 3. And for each of those values, we're going to have a specific output of a bonus premium. So in order to do this, I need to know how to use an if function, and I need to string together multiple if functions together. So let's do this. So I'm going to type in equals if, open brackets, what am I testing for? My logical test is simply to check the value in cell D5, whether that is equal to 1, right? So is the pay grade equal to 1? Basically, I'm asking that, comma, what do you want to do if it is equal to 1? If it is equal to 1, then my output is going to be 2%, right? All I'm doing right now is I'm just reading off the value from the table on the right side, and I'm just using that in my formula directly. So if the value in cell D5 is equal to 1, my output is going to be 2%, comma. What do you want to do if the value in cell D5 is not equal to 1, right? So if that criteria is not being met, then what? In that case, I want to do another check. I want to basically do another conditional check. So I'm going to start another if function right here, right? So you're just going to start another if function once again, open brackets. What's your logical test now? Now my logical test is D5 is equal to 2. Is the pay grade equal to 2? If it is, comma, what do you want to do then? In that case, my output is going to be 3%. If D5 is not equal to 2, all right, so it's done 2 steps now. It's basically checked whether D5 is equal to 1. It's also checked whether D5 is equal to 2. What do you want to do if that's not the case? So, comma, what do we want to do in this case? We want to open up another if right here, and we want to check the value of D5 once more and see whether it's equal to 3. If it is equal to 3, our output is going to be 4%. Right? So in this particular case, your output is going to be 4%. And as you can see from the table on the right side, there is no more checking that needs to be done because there are only 3 valid pay grades. So everything else we can have a default value of some sort, right? So comma, the last thing that you're going to say is the default output for everything else in case those 3 criteria are not being satisfied. So for everything else, we're going to output something different, right? So let's say invalid pay grade, and again I'm enclosing that within quotes, all right? So invalid pay grade. Okay, so that is my final output. Now, like I said in the lab, the tricky part with nested if functions is to make sure that you close the right number of brackets. So in this case, if you look at your formula, you've actually opened up bracket 3 times, so I need to close 3 brackets at the end. Right, once you're done with that, press enter and you should get the correct value in the first case. It would help if you read this function out on your own to see that you understand exactly what's going on. We're checking the value in cell D5 to see if it's equal to 1. If it is equal to 1, my output's going to be 2%. If the value in cell D5 is not equal to 1, then I'd go into another if, and I check whether that value in D5 is equal to 2. If it is equal to 2, my output's going to be 3%. If the value in D5 is still not equal to 2, so it's not equal to 1 and it's not equal to 2, I go into another if, which is my third check, and in that case I'm checking whether D5 is equal to 3. If it is equal to 3, my output is going to be 4%. Otherwise, my default output is going to be invalid pay grade. Right, so that's your nested if function. The other rule of thumb that I gave you in the lab, something that will make your life easier, is to look at the number of outputs. And if you look at the number of outputs, in this case we have 2%, 3%, 4%, or invalid pay grade. So we have 4 possible outputs of this formula. But the number of times you're using the if function is 3 times. So the number of outputs usually is always 1 more than the number of times that you use the if function, right? So that's a rule of thumb that you can remember. So the number of times you use the if function, the number of output values is usually 1 more than that. Okay, so you remember that, and if you're okay with this function now, you could use autofill to fill out the rest of the cells. So you will get the correct values for everything, and then in one case for John Doe, it says invalid pay grade because somebody probably by mistake entered pay grade 4, and there is no such pay grade, so we say invalid pay grade over here. Now we're ready to calculate the bonus. So the bonus is simply going to be the product of the bonus premium, which is cell E5, and the salary, which is in C5, right? So it's E5 times C5. That's your formula. Okay, so you do that for the first cell. You use autofill for the rest of the cells. You are going to get a error for John Doe in row 10 again, because you're trying to multiply a text value with a numerical value. So you can't do that. So you're going to get some sort of an error message there. For purposes of this course, we're not interested in figuring out how we can automate the error checking, so you can just replace this manually with something that you want. So in this case, I'm just going to say NA for not available or not applicable, so I'm just going to replace that myself. For the rest of the values, I'm going to highlight them. Once again, go into the Home tab and use currency as the type of formatting that I want, and I will decrease the number of decimals in this case. All right, so that's your bonus premium that you have in column E, and then in column F you've actually calculated the bonus by multiplying the premium with the salary. Okay, so that's what we did using the nested if example in the lab. Now, also in the lab, I talked about the issue of using VLOOKUP. Now, those of you who've already used VLOOKUP a few times may have realized that in this particular example, we could have used VLOOKUP to do the exact same thing that we just did, because we have a table on the right side, and we can make this into our lookup table. So there's a lookup table for pay grades and bonus premiums. So why not use that lookup table for every person and use that to derive the bonus premium? We can certainly do that in this example. So in this example, using VLOOKUP would definitely work. But once again, it is not a generalization. So you cannot generalize and say that nested if is always equivalent to VLOOKUP. It is not. In this particular case, it is true. It will work, and we're going to do that. But it's not true in all cases. So having said that, let's actually use VLOOKUP. And in the second part, I'm basically not going to do things in 2 steps. I'm actually going to get the bonus premium using VLOOKUP. And as soon as I get the bonus premium using VLOOKUP, I'll multiply that with the salary and get the actual bonus. All right, so that's what I want to do. I want to do everything in one formula. So I'm going to say equals VLOOKUP. Right, so once again, you should know by now how to use the VLOOKUP function. So the VLOOKUP function requires you to provide a few parameters. The first parameter is the value that you're looking up. So the value that I'm looking for is the pay grade, which is in cell D18, comma. Where am I looking? I'm looking in this table over here, which starts from H5 down to I7. And as soon as I highlight that table, I will press F4 or function F4 or command T if you're using a Mac to lock that table, to lock the reference to that table, because that lookup table always stays there. So I'm going to be doing my search in that table, or that's my lookup table, comma. In that table, there are 2 columns. Which column do you want to retrieve the results from? I want to retrieve the result from column number 2, so I will just type in 2 in there. Right, so column number 2 has the bonus premium, so I want to get the bonus premium from that lookup table. Comma, do you want a approximate match or do you want an exact match? So you're being asked that as the last parameter. In this case, let's ask for an exact match. So I'll double click the false or the exact match value, close brackets, and enter. And you basically get 3% as your bonus premium for the first person. But like I said, I'm not just interested in the bonus premium. I want to actually calculate the bonus. So I'm going to go back into my formula, and in my formula bar, I'm just going to say, yes, whatever VLOOKUP result you get, multiply that right away with the salary, which is in cell C18. So I'm just multiplying it with cell C18 to get the actual bonus, right? And that comes out to 1455, but it's not in the proper format right now. It's showing you as a percentage value, which is incorrect. So we'll have to go into our Home tab and change this from percentage to currency, right? So let's change this from percentage to currency, and once again, let's just get rid of the decimals in this case. And once you're satisfied with the formatting, you can now use autofill for the rest of the column. You will get an error message, as we did before for John Doe, because pay grade was 4 and our lookup table did not have pay grade 4. So that gives you an error message. So once again, you can leave it as it is, or you can just replace it with your own specific piece of text. So I'm just going to say NA for not available or not applicable once again. So you have used VLOOKUP and your answers are exactly the same as you got in the nested if. So in this example, VLOOKUP was able to do what we did using nested if. So now we've used conditional functions. If is an example of a conditional function, and we've actually used nested if to string together multiple conditional functions together to check for multiple criteria one step at a time. All right, so that was our basic conditional functions. The last part of the lab, I'm going to go back to worksheet number 1 again, so the logical conditional examples, and we're going to work with the bottom part of this worksheet, which has some questions for us. This is where we have to use summary conditional functions. Once again, look at your slides to see the definitions of summary conditional functions. But the idea here is that Excel does provide you with a lot of summary conditional functions which provide you with aggregate values like counts and sums and averages. So count if, average if, sum if are your summary conditional functions, and depending on whether you have one criteria to check or multiple criteria to check, you could use count if, sum if, average if for single criteria checking, or you can use the plural form of those functions, count ifs, sum ifs, average ifs for multiple criteria if you want to check those. And again, this will become clear as we work through these examples. So our first question is to see how many properties have been listed for 75 days or more. Right, so we want to do a count right now. So you can probably do a count by just eyeballing the data, because this is not a lot of data. You can just see how many properties have been on the market for 75 days or more. And if you just eyeball that quickly, you'll probably see that there are about 6 of them. And we just want to use the COUNTIF function to come up with that answer. So I'm going to use the COUNTIF function. And as I said in the lab, to be honest, sometimes I get confused with these functions as well, in terms of the order of the parameters, or where to use quotes and where not to use quotes. So I always like using the Excel function builder, or the formula builder in this case. So I'm just going to click on the FX button right beside the formula bar, and I'm going to do a search for COUNTIF. And once it comes up in the answers, in the search results, I'm just going to double click it, and I'm going to use the function arguments to actually fill out the parts of the function. So I'm going to use the COUNTIF function. I just need to specify the range that I'm going to do the count and the criteria. So the range that I'm doing the count is this over here with the days on market column. D2 to D13 is my range. And the criteria, like I said, in this case, is number of properties listed for 75 days or more. So our criteria is 75 days or more. So greater than, equal to 75. So that's your criteria. So check range D2 to D13 for values that are greater than, equal to 75. Say OK, and you basically get 6 as the answer. Now, if you look at the formula, in the formula bar, it basically says D2 to D13, and then it enclosed greater than, equal to 75 in quotes. Now, I wouldn't have remembered that, or I would have had to actually do a little bit of trial and error. And that's why I like using the dialog box to fill out the details of the function, because then Excel takes care of this for me. Okay. All right, so that's the COUNTIF. Let's go to the next one. Total sales from properties sold by David Ortiz. So we want to calculate a total of sales. So this is where we use the SUMIF function. So let's click on the FX button again, insert function, and we're looking for the SUMIF function. And once it appears in our search results, I'm going to double click it. In this case, there are 3 criteria: the range that I'm going to check, the criteria that I'm checking for, and the range over which I'm going to take the sum. Right? So there are 3 criteria. So the range that I'm checking in this case is the agent column. The agent that I'm interested in checking for is David Ortiz. So that's my criteria. And the sum range is the range that I'm going to take the sum from. So I'm interested in total sales, so I will take the sum of the sale price column. So I'll do that. So for every time there's David Ortiz listed in column A, I want you to take the sum of the sale price column for David Ortiz. All right, so that's what's going to happen in this case. You say OK, and you get 514,500. As we're doing this, let's just go ahead and convert this into a currency value so that we know that this is in currency. All right, next one. Total sales from properties listed for 75 days or more. It's asking you for total sales once again, so we're going to do a sum if once again, right? So let's do that. Okay, so we've used sum if before. So what's our range? 75 days or more is what we're checking. So days on market is our range. 75 days or more, so that's greater than or equal to 75. And then the sum range is once again the total sales, right? So we want to take the total from the sale column. So C2 to C13. You say okay, that comes out to, let's convert this to a currency, right? So that comes out to 1,326,400. All right, so that's your total sale from properties listed for 75 days or more. Okay, moving on. Average number of days on market for properties below 200,000. So this time we're going to use the average if function, and then our criteria is property list price is below 200,000. Okay, so keep that in mind. Click on the FX insert function, and we're searching for average if. And once average if comes up, I'm going to double click it. So the range that I'm checking for is the list price column. And the list price column, I'm checking the criteria is below 200,000, so less than 200,000 is my criteria. And I'm interested in calculating the average number of days. So I have to do the average in the days on market column, which is D2 to D13. Right, you say okay, and the average comes out to 65. Right, so that's 65 days. Okay, moving on. Number of properties listed at 175,000 or less. So that's less than or equal to 175,000. And they've been on the market for 75 days or more. Right, so that's greater than or equal to 75. So now you have two criteria. And as soon as you get into two or more criteria, you basically use the same functions, but just the plural form of that function. So in this case, we want to do a count, but we have two criteria, so we're going to use count ifs, right? Not count if, but just count ifs in this case. So let's do that. So click on insert function, search for count ifs, right? There's an S at the end, so search for count ifs. Once it appears in your results, double click it. It's going to ask you for criteria range number 1, criteria number 1, and it's going to keep populating this as you go along. So my first criteria range is the list price column, and I'm checking to see whether the list price is less than or equal to 175,000. That's my first criteria. My second criteria range has to say 75 days or more, right? So the days on market column is greater than equal to 75, right? So if you had more criteria, you could keep going. We just have two criteria, so check column B for values that are less than or equal to 175,000, and then check column D for properties that have been on the market for greater than or equal to 75 days. Those are your two criteria. You say okay, and there are two such properties, right? So there are two properties that meet both of those criteria at the same time. Okay, you can do a quick check yourself by just eyeballing the data and see whether you can find those two properties. Let's go on to the last one, which is total sales from properties listed at 175,000 or less and been on the market for 75 days or more. So this is just the total sales we're doing. So we need to use the sum ifs function. So let's click on insert function. We're going to search for sum ifs with an S at the end, right? And once it comes up, we're just going to double click it. This time around, the first thing you need to specify is the sum range. So what is the range that you're going to take the sum over? So I'm going to take the sum over the sale price column because I need the total sales. So take the sum over the sale price column. What's your first criteria range? My first criteria range was the list price. That the list price is less than or equal to 175,000. My second criteria range was days on market has been greater than or equal to 75, right? So those were your two criteria. You say okay, and the answer you get is 270, 700. Okay, so properties listed at $175,000 or less and been on the market for 75 days or more, right? So that's your sum of the sales. All right, so once again, let's convert this into a currency value. Okay, so that we know right away that that's 270,700. Okay, so that basically completes the answers to these questions. Now there is one last part here where we need to get a list of all the agents and also calculate their total sales. So the first thing that you need to do for this part is to get a list of all the unique agents. So in your agent column, each agent may appear multiple times. So we don't want that. We just want all the unique sales agents from that column. We want to put them in this column over here under agents. And then once we have that, we want to calculate their total sales. So we've actually talked about retrieving unique values from a column before. So let's do that first. And if you remember again, all you need to do is highlight the column where you want to get the unique values from, including the heading. So in this case, the agent heading should be selected as well. So highlight that entire column, click on the Data tab, and in your Sort and Filter category, I'm going to click on Advanced, and I'm going to say my list range. Okay, so the list range is your column that you just selected from A1 to A13. I'm going to copy this to another location. And where do you want to copy this to? So I can copy this wherever I want. Let me actually copy this to a different column to begin with. So I'm going to copy this to, say, M1, right? So I'm going to copy this to M1. So I'm taking the range from A1 to A13. I'm going to copy it to M1. I only want to copy the unique records, all right? So these are the things that you need to specify. So copy to another location, unique records only, and I'm taking the range from A1 to A13 and copying it to M1. So click on OK and see what happens. You basically get your sales agents. All the unique values from that column are now retrieved. Now once they are retrieved, you can just copy them from here into your agents column. So I'm just going to do a Control-C and Control-V to actually copy them over to the agents column. The formatting you can fix. So there's some shading that I need to do. So I can do that pretty easily just to match the formatting. And once you have that, then you can actually delete whatever you pasted in column M. So I'm just going to highlight column M, and under the Home tab, I'm just going to go under Clear, Clear All. Okay, so total sales for each of those sales agents. That's what we need to calculate. So basically what we want to do is we want to calculate the total sales. So we want to do a sum if. So I can click on Insert Function. I'm searching for sum if, right? I'm just checking for the agent's name, right? So there's only one criteria, so I could use the sum if function. So I'm going to double click it. So what's your range, what's your criteria, what's your sum range? So the range that I'm checking is the agent column, right? So A2 to A13. What's my criteria? My criteria now is the name of the agent right beside the total sales column. So Richard's name needs to be highlighted, right? So it's in G16. And the sum range is the sale price column. So you want to get the total sales for Richard, then the total sales for David, Kim, and so on and so forth. Now, when you click on these ranges are going to be absolute, whereas the criteria is going to be relative. So be careful with that, right? So basically, when you click on A2 to A13, and when you click on C2 to C13, you want to make them into absolute values. The reason is because we want to use this formula once in the first cell, and then we want to use autofill, right? So when you use autofill, you don't want the references to the agent column and the sale price column to change. So since you want to fix this, I'm just going to highlight the range and click on F4 or Command T. Similarly for the sum range, I'm going to highlight it and click on F4 or Command T so that I get an absolute reference to these two ranges. G16 can become G17, G18, G19, so that does not need to be absolute, but the range that you're checking and the range that you're taking the sum over, those ranges stay static and fixed where they are. So you have to lock those references. Say OK. So you get the total sales for Richard. Let's use currency value as our preferred format here. And then let's use autofill for the rest of the people. Okay, so you basically get 514,500 for David. We'd already calculated that in one of the previous questions in cell E17, right? So you also see that value there. So both of these match. So that's good to see. All right, so you can fix the formatting if you like. Center stuff and whatnot. And once you're done with that, that's basically it. So you've now used summary conditional functions like sum if, average if, count if, and you've also used summary conditional functions which allow you to specify multiple criteria like sum ifs, average ifs, and count ifs. So hopefully that's clear to you as well. So that brings us to the end of this example of logical tests, logical functions, and conditional functions. Once again, I do encourage you to go through your slides to make sure that you understand the concepts behind these three categories of features and functions in Excel. And you also go through these exercises on your own so that you understand how to use logical tests, logical functions, and conditional functions. So hopefully this is helpful. If you have any questions, please let me know in class. Thank you.